Today, I'll share with you a tool, a method you can use to get better at solving your own problems and at overcoming whatever challenges you may face. This is a hugely valuable life skill because no matter what you do, there will always be problems and challenges in life. And if you feel like you're competent at understanding problems, at facing challenges, and at finding your own solutions, that makes a huge difference to your experience of life, makes a huge difference to your level of competence, and basically to whether you have a good time or whether you're constantly suffering. It's a topic that I think is very important because my goal with everything I do here is to empower you. So the idea is not that you need me to solve your problems. The idea is actually the opposite. I want to give you the tools so you no longer need me, so you don't have to watch my content. I am basically trying to make myself obsolete. And so this is exactly what today's tool is about. This is essentially how you can get advice from yourself for how to solve your own problems. Now, as usual, I will frame this, I basically use the example of porn addiction as a guiding example for where to apply this and how to apply this. But this exact same principle can be applied to really any challenge, anything you want to deal with, or anything you need to overcome in your life. So let's get into it. There are two parts to this. And the first part is a prompt. This is a question you can ask yourself when you're struggling with something. And the question is, what am I avoiding? This is a great question to ask yourself, especially when you are doing like escapist stuff. So whenever you have the urge to watch porn, to binge social media, to watch Netflix or YouTube, to binge eat, anything like that, these are all the same kind of behavior where you're kind of trying to escape into stimulation. I've talked about this many times before, that all forms of addiction are basically a coping mechanism. You are using your addiction to avoid something, to not feel some painful feeling, perhaps. And so when this is happening, when you have a strong urge, or maybe you're even in the middle of binging, in the middle of escaping, and you notice it happening, you can ask yourself, what am I avoiding? Another variation of this prompt is, what am I afraid of? Or, what am I afraid would happen if I stopped doing this thing? So for example, what am I afraid would happen if I stopped watching porn? This is a question that can help you get at the underlying issue, the thing that drives your addiction. And the underlying issue is often a bit tricky to get at. It might not be obvious. It's one of those shadowy things because, like I said, the addiction is a coping mechanism. You're basically successfully avoiding a confrontation with this thing. Now, here's a little addition to make this more effective. Something to keep in mind is when you give yourself this prompt, when you ask yourself, what am I avoiding? Ask the addicted part of yourself. Ask the part of yourself that wants to watch porn or binge eat or binge watch or whatever, and see what that part has to say. So let me give you an example. A younger version of me who was addicted to porn, if I had asked myself this question, if I had known about this prompt, it's like, okay, I want to watch porn all the time. What am I avoiding? What am I afraid would happen if I stopped watching porn? And if I let that sink in, what I would notice is like, okay, I'm afraid of something that has to do with like girls and dating. And really what I'm afraid of is like, I'm afraid of making some kind of a mistake here. I'm basically afraid of my own sexual desires, and I'm certainly afraid of expressing my sexual desires. There's some belief in me that basically says my sexual desires are somehow wrong and dirty, and if I express them to someone else, then it's almost like I'm violating them in some way. And I don't want to be that creepy, gross guy. And so in order to avoid that, in order to avoid potentially making that mistake, right, and being rejected and being labeled as a creep, I essentially manage or I escape my own sexual desires by using porn all the time. So that's an example of the underlying issue that causes addiction. That's the example that applied to me personally. That was the strongest reason that kept me addicted to porn. And of course, your answer is probably going to be different. And let me be clear, it might take some digging here. I'm not saying you can just ask yourself, what am I avoiding? And immediately a fully formed answer will drop into your mind, and that's kind of the solution, right? The way this tool works is it's really an introspective thing. Try to drop this question and not use your thinking mind to answer it. Like almost try to drop this question like inside yourself, if that makes sense, and see what spontaneously emerges. What helps me is to write about it. So I'll write the question, then pause and see what comes out. Really, the authentic answer, the true answer is usually something that kind of spontaneously comes out. It's not the logical thinking mind thing that would come out if you just kind of ask yourself logically, what might I be avoiding? It should be more intuitive than that, ideally. And this takes some practice. The practice of asking yourself this question and kind of just waiting for an answer. Sometimes also the answer comes in like whispers, where you might just have like a snippet of a memory from a long time ago comes up. And you go, what was that? But that's a hint. And you write that down. Okay, I just remembered this one situation, whatever. And you write down whatever details you remember. And then you can ask yourself, okay, is there more? And just see if more stuff comes up. I know this sounds a bit weird, but it's really worth trying and practicing this. What will happen when you do this is that the better you get at it, and like as you get used to really waiting for an answer, what will happen is that often the answer will surprise you. And this is a good sign, right? Because this means that it's not your logical mind giving the answer. It's something more intuitive. It's something more coming from your subconscious. And sometimes what will happen is that you ask yourself a question, or you give a prompt like that, and an answer comes out that is totally surprising to you, and also just something clicks into place, right? You suddenly finally see something where you're like, oh, right, that's what's going on. But it was totally surprising to you. That is a really good sign. That means that you are developing the ability to essentially communicate with your subconscious. Now, like I said, for me, the most effective way to do this is through writing. That helps me kind of almost create an internal dialogue like that. So that's what I recommend you try. If you want to learn more about this, by the way, there is an introspective writing crash course, a very simple course that teaches the very basics of how to do this kind of writing as effectively as possible. It's available completely for free in the Quit by Healing community, and I'll link to that below. Also, with all this talk about underlying issues, let me just mention that I am working on a series of shorts that just gives examples of like, what are these underlying issues? Like, what are the things we're coping with porn addiction? Because it's different for everyone. So I'm just giving a bunch of examples in these shorts. I'll link to that below as well. Maybe that helps you, just seeing some examples. Maybe you resonate with some of them, and that can help you kind of, again, it can be a lead, right? It can be a first impression, and you can then follow that lead through further inquiry and further writing. All right, so that's the first part. You prompt yourself, what am I avoiding? What am I afraid of? With this, you might uncover some deeper truth about what is keeping you addicted. But that still faces you with the problem of, okay, how do I solve it? So in my case, okay, I have this shame around my sexual desires. I have these fears around dating and all this kind of stuff, which is good to know. But now how do I solve this problem? I think many of us are used to essentially looking externally for solutions, and sometimes that can be a good idea. But unfortunately, especially if you look online, there are many answers to every question you can ask. And most of them are nonsense, because most of the stuff you find online is essentially optimized for engagement. It's optimized to get clicks. It's optimized to get ad views. It's not optimized for truth. What I found to be more effective to find good answers is generally to look for books. Okay, books tend to not be engagement optimized and tend to be a bit more truth focused. Although, of course, there's also a lot of nonsense in books. Which is to say, there's nothing wrong with identifying a problem and then looking online for solutions. But I want to give you an alternative that, again, is a bit more empowering, because often you are able to actually solve your own problems far better than you realize. And sometimes you are the best person to ask about advice for solving your problems. This is a similar thing we're doing here. You can essentially ask yourself for advice. But for this to work, there's definitely a right way and a wrong way to do it. To explain this, think about role-playing or acting. Obviously, different people have varying talents when it comes to their ability to act or to role-play as a different person. And, I would count myself as one of the people who has very little talent or very little skill in that area. But regardless, we can all do it to some extent. It's one of the things you can do as a human being. It's almost like you can inhabit a different perspective. You can pretend to be someone else. And here's a simple example. Think about porn addiction. Again, imagine I'm feeling a strong urge to watch porn. And I can then imagine, okay, right now I have this urge to watch porn. what does the weakest, least powerful, most pathetic, most victim-minded version of myself have to do with this? So imagine a super weak, pathetic, hopeless version of yourself, right? A kind of a shriveled up version of yourself. What does that version, pretend to be that version of you and see what do you have to say about wanting to watch porn and porn addiction. So if I imagine that, if I try to inhabit that version of me, he says something like, it's all hopeless anyway. What's the point? What's the point? This urge is way too strong. You're going to try to resist it, and then you're going to relapse anyway. And anyway, look, you're a loser. You're always going to be a loser. Whether you stop watching porn or not makes no difference anyway. Life sucks. Everything sucks. You're going to be a loser forever. And so at least, have 10 minutes of fun or 20 minutes of fun or however long you manage to keep going in this session. At least let me have this little joy because it's all hopeless anyway. So that's quite easy, isn't it? And you can try this out, right? Pretend to be the weakest version of you. That feels easy to do. Well, guess what? You can just do the opposite of that. You can pretend to be the highest version of yourself, the most powerful version of yourself. You can pretend to be an older, wiser, more experienced version of yourself. And in exactly the same way, you can inhabit that perspective. You can ask yourself, okay, I have this urge, I'm struggling with porn addiction. What does an older, wiser, more powerful version of me, what does the best possible version of me have to say about this? And again, I can just tune in. What does that version have to say? And it's something like, okay, look, right now you're feeling this urge, but if you actually pay attention to what's happening, the experience of this urge, it's not actually painful. It's not actually that difficult. You have endured many things in your life that are far worse than this. And you're telling yourself a story right now. It's oh, I can't do this. But actually, if you pay attention, it's hold on, you've done things that are so much more difficult than this. And what's really going on, look, the truth is, you know that you are actually way more powerful than this addiction. You know that. You know that you can withstand this urge. You know that you can make it through the withdrawals. The truth is, and you don't want to admit this to yourself, but the truth is, and you know it deep down, you could withstand this urge even if it was 10 times stronger. You could withstand this urge even if it was 100 times stronger, because the feeling itself is really not that strong. Compared to, think about some stuff you've gone through, the worst dentist appointment you've ever had. How much worse was that? That was 1,000 times worse, and you survived that. So you actually know that you are stronger than this. So that's what came out. Again, I'm just kind of pretending to be a different version of myself. This is what comes out. Now you can apply this to advice as well. So again, I can ask, all right, this is what I'm struggling with. You're telling me I'm powerful enough to overcome this. But give me some practical advice. What am I supposed to do? How do I actually do this? I'm suffering here. Help me fix this. And then again, imagine, pretend to be the most powerful version of you. What does he have to say about this? All right, I get it. You're suffering right now. Feels overwhelming. The first thing to do is to come into the present moment. There's thoughts running through your head. You're telling yourself all kinds of stories, right? Come into the present moment. And do whatever helps you do that. Maybe go outside and step onto the grass with bare feet. Maybe, just get away from the screens. Look at the horizon. Connect with the present moment. Maybe take a cold shower, right? Maybe cold water often brings us into the present in a way that's kind of undeniable. Do something that brings you into the here and now. That's the solution to the overwhelm and the constant thinking that you're experiencing. Come into the here and now. And then do the thing that you're afraid of. Do the thing that you're avoiding. Because ultimately, unless you deal with the thing that you're avoiding through your addiction is always going to come back. So this is the sign for you. This is the sign for you to take a small step, or maybe a large step, towards actually facing this thing. Basically, do the thing that your addiction, that your fear is telling you not to do. That is where the growth lies. So maybe send that girl you have a crush on a message, or finally do a few solid hours of work on your side hustle instead of only talking about it, or finally sign up to that boxing gym, or whatever it is that you've been putting off for whatever reasons, for whatever fear-based reasons. do that thing. Find a small step towards doing that thing and do it in such a way. Look, the key here is to do something that you are proud of, regardless of the outcome. So if that girl you send a message to that you're crushing on doesn't like you back or rejects you or ignores you, it doesn't matter. The thing that you did is you took action, right? You took courageous action. And then the outcome is whatever. Start acting in a way that you can be proud of and start taking deliberate daily steps towards that thing that your addiction wants you to avoid. That's the solution. So that's what came up for me. And I do think that this is probably fairly universally applicable advice. But if you do this exercise yourself, you will get more customized advice. You will get better advice for yourself. And just like with the exercise before, this is something you get better at over time. You get better at inhabiting that higher version of yourself. You get better at giving yourself actually good advice. This might feel a little awkward in the beginning. Once again, I recommend doing this via writing. That has been the most powerful way for me to do it, usually via handwriting. Ask yourself these questions and see what answers emerge. And the more you do this, the better you get at it. So that is the maybe somewhat strange but surprisingly effective way in which you can get really good at solving your own problems, overcoming your own challenges, and giving yourself better advice than anyone else can give you. So I really encourage you to try this out. And if you're interested in learning more tools like this, make sure you click the first link in the description where you can sign up to my newsletter and you can sign up to the Quit by Healing community where I share lots and lots of practical tips like this. Also, if you appreciate this kind of content, you can help me spread the word and get more people to learn about these tools by just interacting with this. Leave a like, leave a thumbs up, a comment, interact with this somehow. That gives it a little boost in the algorithm, and that always helps. Also, if you want to learn my 21-day step-by-step program for overcoming porn addiction for good, that is also available through the first link in the description. And that is all for now. I'll see you again next time.